In the Imperium of Man, survival is not a right, it is a transaction. Beneath the burning stars of the galaxy, among crumbling worlds and endless hive spires, the act of simply existing carries a price, one that is measured not in kindness, fairness, or justice, but in coin, in credits, in thrones, in favors, in flesh, in pain, in obedience. Currency in the Imperium is not just a means of exchange, it is a method of control, a language of debt, a manifestation of hierarchy. It is the invisible chain that binds 1 trillion lives to a machine that does not care if they live or die, so long as they function. The Imperium's economy is not free, nor is it planned. It is not stable, nor is it rational. It is something far worse. It is inherited, broken, and unquestioned. It is the product of an ancient civilization that no longer remembers why it created the systems it now enforces. It is sacred, ossified, and weaponized. It is enforced by tradition, fear, and inertia more than any market force. And at the heart of it lies a currency with a name that might sound familiar, the Imperial Credit, or as some still call it, the Imperial Throne. But to speak of the Imperial Credit as though it were a consistent, universal standard is a dangerous oversimplification. Because the truth is, there is no single currency in the Imperium. Not really. There is no central bank, no regulating authority, no unified standard, no interplanetary fiscal policy. The word throne may be used in Hive Necromunda, in the feral death worlds of the Calixis sector, or on the orbital trading stations of the Segmentum Solar, but its value, its meaning, and its very existence can vary wildly from system to system, from planet to planet, even from one hive spire to the next. Yet despite this chaos, despite the lack of a unified standard, the idea of the Imperial Credit persists. It is a shared fiction, a binding illusion, a psychological constant in a universe of variables. And that idea is enforced not by trust, but by force. It is important to understand that the Imperium, despite its immense scope, is not a nation. It is not an empire in the sense that ancient terror once understood. It is a patchwork of 1 million worlds, many of which have not communicated directly in centuries. Some are ruled by planetary governors, some by tyrants, some by religious hierarchs, others by warlords wearing the rotted regalia of extinct dynasties. In such a fractured realm, how can a single system of value even exist? The answer is terrifyingly simple, because it must. Trade still occurs, goods still move, tithes are still extracted, but above all, obedience is still required. And to extract obedience, to enforce loyalty, and to maintain the gears of exploitation, something resembling a currency, any currency, must exist. Even if it is fake, even if it is meaningless, even if it is backed by nothing but tradition and bullets. And so, a fractured, contradictory web of local currencies is maintained across the Imperium, each one bearing the sacred appearance of legitimacy, a symbol of the Emperor's will, a relic of the Golden Age. Some are digital, recorded in the cogitator systems of Administratum outposts. Others are stamped in plasteel, or etched into thin slivers of ceramite. A few are ancient, nearly forgotten STC-based currencies, lost to time, but still treated as sacred script by worlds that no longer understand what they hold. There are throne gelt, metallic coins said to be blessed with the Emperor's visage. There are vox codes and authorization slates used in Mechanicus-controlled domains where currency becomes data. There are labor tokens, ration stamps, and promissory scrolls sealed by noble wax. And in many places, the most valuable currency of all is simply information, or flesh, or passage. None of these currencies are backed by gold. None are backed by trust. They are backed by fear. They are backed by necessity. They are backed by the promise that if you do not pay, you will be punished. It is not that the people of the Imperium believe in the value of their currency. It is that they have no choice but to behave as if they do. The illusion is not one of wealth, but of consequence. It is not faith in the system. It is submission to the consequences of disobedience. It is, at its core, a weapon. And like all weapons in the Imperium, it is wielded with ruthless indifference. You can see it in the way a ganger in the underhives trades stolen food rations for a cracked Mechanicus stim. You can feel it in the desperation of a clerk at a tithe-weighing station who sells a month's worth of wages for a single vial of recaf. You can taste it in the mud of a penal colony where a man will trade his last breath for a lighter sentence on a meaningless ledger. The Imperial Credit is not just a unit of value, it is the measure of how much someone is willing to suffer to stay alive. And yet, across this scattered, dying empire, the system persists. Fragile, corrupted, broken, and still working. Still draining, still extracting, still controlling. 1 trillion voices, 1 trillion transactions, and not a single one free. Who decides what anything is worth in a galaxy ruled by silence and fire? In the Imperium, there is no free market. There is no capitalism, not as we once knew it. There is no communism, no socialism, no barter utopia. There is only the Adeptus Administratum, a bureaucratic monstrosity so vast and calcified that it no longer obeys logic or intention. Its ledgers are written in blood and dust. Its numbers are chiseled into stone by generations who die before they see the results of their calculations. It is here, in this administrative abyss, that the value of a life, a bolt shell, a ration bar, or an hour of light is determined. But the Administratum does not assign value out of malice. It does not weigh souls for pleasure. It does not set prices because it wants to. It does so because someone must. Because if it didn't, the entire corpse empire would fracture beyond even the illusion of order. The truth is far more disturbing than oppression. The truth is that there is no one else left to do the job. From orbiting data vaults around Holy Terror to decrepit record halls in the Segmentum Obscurus, the Adeptus Administratum maintains the illusion of coherence. They issue tithes, they dictate quotas, they calculate the minimum amount of caloric intake a factory worker can survive on without dying too quickly. They decide how much a cubic meter of water is worth on a hive world versus an agri-world. They declare, in fractured codes and forgotten dialects, what a single Imperial credit is worth in relation to promethium, plasma charges, and parchment. Most of these values are never updated. Some haven't changed in 10,000 years. The original creators of this system are long dead, their rationales consumed by war and time. What remains are hollow functions, automated rituals repeated out of habit and fear. The Administratum doesn't understand the economy it maintains. It simply perpetuates it. It is a self-replicating disease, assigning worth to everything and understanding none of it. Yet it is not the only architect of value. In the forge worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus, currency is not counted in thrones or gelt. It is quantified in data, labor, and sacred function. A tech priest might trade an ancient cogitator core for a memory schema. A servitor's arm could be exchanged for heat ration allowances. Entire manufactoria contracts are negotiated not with currency, but with access to blueprints, to forbidden schematics, to forgotten STC fragments. And still, the illusion of value persists, not because it is shared, but because it is enforced. In the hive cities, value is determined by the gangs and guilds who operate beneath the sanctioned strata of noble-born control. Down here, deep beneath the glow of lumen strips and the weight of uncounted ferrocrete, value is primal, it is fluid, it is violent. A gilder can dictate that a single bolt round is worth a man's teeth, and that man will comply, not because he agrees, but because disagreement is fatal. Then there are the void-faring rogue traders, whose currency is shaped by ambition and audacity. These few individuals are empowered by ancient warrants to operate beyond the rigid constraints of imperial law. They trade with Xenos, they deal in relics, they barter with secrets. To them, currency is leverage, it is narrative, it is theatre. A single, well-timed transaction can shift the power balance of entire sectors. But even rogue traders rely on the myth of the Imperial Credit when dealing with imperial institutions. Because as fluid as value may be, the illusion of stability is a weapon, and everyone, from the High Lords of Terror to the starving serfs of a war-racked shrine world, is taught to believe in it, or at the very least, to fear it. The ecclesiarchy, the religious backbone of the Imperium, has its own role to play. To the Ministorum, the concept of currency is spiritual as much as material. Donations to the church are not just offerings, they are redemptive transactions. Every throne gifted to the ecclesiarchy is a sin forgiven. Every tithe paid in sacred ceremony is another breath purchased in a life otherwise forfeit. The idea that a soul can be bought, that penance can be exchanged for credits, is not heresy. It is liturgy. These are the architects of worth, not economists, not bankers, but priests, scribes, warlords, machine cultists, and desperate scavengers clinging to the bones of a dead age. They do not understand the system they maintain, but they enforce it with religious precision. Because value in the Imperium is not defined by balance sheets, it is defined by violence, bureaucracy, and divine mandate. What matters is not whether something should be worth what it is. What matters is that if you question its value, you will suffer. And so the illusion holds. Because those who dare to ask why a cracked data slate is worth more than a man's life, or why a family's debt can be inherited across centuries, or why a single gallon of clean water costs more than a week's wages, they do not ask again. They disappear. There are worlds where you can sell your skin, others where your memories are more valuable than your blood. In the Imperium of Man, currency is not limited to stamped metal or digitized ledgers. It is the body, broken and bartered. It is the soul, crushed and commodified. Flesh is value, and in the eyes of the Imperium, it is fungible. This is not metaphor. The systems of imperial economy, fragmented as they are, consistently return to a grim constant. The body is a resource. A citizen's worth is tallied not only in the credits they earn, but in the labor they can perform, the pain they can endure, and the control they will submit to. In many cases, the body itself is payment. Consider the indenture worlds of the Eastern Fringe, where entire generations are born into debt bondage. When a parent dies before fulfilling their quota, their child is drafted to complete it. If that child falls behind, another is conscripted. The debt does not expire. It does not inflate. It does not forgive. It simply transfers. Across decades, across centuries, across bloodlines. The meat is kept in motion. The system feeds. In hive cities like Tarsus Ultra or Necromunda, there is a thriving black market in fleshware. Limbs, organs, ocular augments, pain dampeners, everything has a price. In the Underhive, a fresh kidney might fetch a ration bar. A cybernetic eye, salvaged from a corpse, can be traded for a week's shelter. Here, barter transcends coin. The economy is surgical. A man is not merely a man, he is parts, he is product. The Mechanicus understands this implicitly. To them, the flesh is weak, but not worthless. Servitors, mind-wiped husks of once living men and women, are among the most widely circulated commodities in the Imperium. A penal world might deliver thousands of prisoners to a forge world in exchange for maintenance rights, plasma cells, or doctrinal upgrades. These prisoners are then lobotomized, stripped of identity, fused with machinery, and deployed as labor units. The transaction is complete. The currency was flesh. In such a universe, slavery is not condemned, it is standardized. It is regulated, taxed, and codified in administratum ledgers. The term indentured worker is a euphemism so widespread that its meaning has eroded entirely. A man might volunteer for servitude to pay for his family's medical treatment. A child might be signed away to the Scholastia Sicana in exchange for shelter. The soul, in these cases, becomes collateral. The trade is sanctified. The pain is bureaucratized. In the ecclesiarchy's domain, the body is not only currency, it is sacrifice. Pilgrims arriving at shrine worlds are often required to perform acts of penance before being granted entry. This may mean weeks of fasting, bloodletting, or forced labor in the name of the emperor. But for the poor, the desperate, and the unclean, the cost of spiritual redemption is often far greater. One might sell their fertility for a vial of blessed amasec. Another might surrender their voice, tongue removed as part of a holy vow, in exchange for a chance to serve as a silent preacher. Redemption has a price, and the church always collects. And then there are the Schola Progenium and the Astra Militarum. The emperor's tithe is not always paid in material goods. Sometimes it is paid in bodies. Millions of imperial citizens are conscripted each cycle, plucked from the wreckage of war, famine, or policy. A governor short on resources may offer more men instead of Promethium. A forge world behind on quota may send 20,000 failed tech initiates as penal infantry. These humans are not paid. They are not compensated. They are offered as coin. A guardsman is worth a rifle, a flak vest, a laspack, and a death sentence, and yet the exchange is seen as fair. Why? Because the Imperium does not care about efficiency. It cares about function, and it functions through loss. Even the Astartes, those demigods of war, rely on a form of body currency. The selection process for Space Marine aspirants is brutal, drawn from death worlds, warrior clans, hive gangs. Candidates are tested, tortured, and killed until only the strongest remain. These survivors are then rebuilt, filled with gene seed and augmetics reshaped into weapons. But the cost does not disappear. Entire tribes are extinguished. Cultures are annihilated. The gene seed itself is priceless, and its implantation is a gamble. Every failure is a waste. Every success is a triumph of extraction. And what of the soul? To the Inquisition, heresy has value. The confession of a cultist can be traded for political leverage. The location of a demon host can be bartered for clemency. Within the shadowy cabals of Ordo Malleus and Ordo Hereticus, there is a thriving economy of sin. A whispered secret might be worth an entire noble line. A soul's damnation can become a bargaining chip. The warp itself becomes a ledger, an abstract accounting of corruption, temptation, and guilt. All of this is to say that currency in the Imperium is not abstract. It is immediate. It is personal. It is you. The system survives not because people believe in it, but because it consumes them before they realize they had the right to resist. The truth is buried beneath ritual, beneath terror, beneath doctrine. The people do not ask why their bodies are currency, because they have been told since birth that they are property, that their suffering has meaning, that their obedience is payment, that their death is a deposit. The lie is perfect, the machine is hungry, and it will never stop collecting. Power in the Imperium is not bought, it is spent. To rule a world, a hive, a regiment, a manufactorum, is to hemorrhage value constantly, to drown in obligation, to burn credits faster than they can be counted. Authority is not a privilege in the Imperium, it is a debt that deepens with every breath. Planetary governors, often mistaken as kings in all but name, do not own their worlds. They lease them from the Emperor, not in coin, but in obedience, in output, in blood. The title they hold, the writ of rule, is not a reward, it is a contract, a prison of responsibility, locked in place by a tithe schedule that never changes, even as populations collapse and resources dry up. To fail that contract is to be replaced. To rebel against it is to be exterminated. The price of power is not freedom, it is permanent exposure to judgment from above. These rulers spend millions of thrones each day, not on luxury, but on logistics. On suppressing riots, fortifying their walls, bribing rival factions, funding the Administratum's endless audits. The deeper you rise in the Imperium, the more you owe. Nobles and officials live in opulence not because they are rich, but because they are required to appear so. The illusion of strength is its own currency. To show weakness is to invite collapse. And so, planetary elites trade favors like promissory notes. They auction off their children in political marriages. They risk ruin to host week-long feasts for visiting representatives from the ecclesiarchy or the Astra Militarum, all in the desperate hope of buying a few more years of stability. The higher one climbs, the more abstract the transactions become. A High Lord of Terror might spend billions of thrones funding a single campaign across the Segmentum Pacificus. But those thrones are not actual coins. They are entitlements, authorizations, access to labor, to servitor shipments, to forge rights, to ecclesiastical blessings. Even the throne itself, the theoretical gold-backed coin of the Imperium, is often ceremonial, referenced in contracts and speeches, but rarely seen in physical form. And yet, despite this abstraction, the consequences are very real. When the High Lords reassign Forge World output quotas, an entire subsector might collapse. When a new ecclesiarch demands greater offerings to fund a holy crusade, worlds already starving are told to tithe twice. The command economy of the Imperium is so vast, so sluggish, so irrational, that every decision becomes a cascade of unintended consequences, and no one is exempt. To maintain power, rulers must make constant payments, to the Administratum for records, to the Officio Assassinorum for silence, to the Inquisition for leniency, to the Navy for protection, to the Arbeits for enforcement. Each of these branches extracts their due not because they are greedy, but because the system demands it. Power is bought in segments, but paid for all at once. And those who cannot pay, they are burned. Look to the feud-ruled moons of the Adrantis Nebula. When their governor defaulted on tithe obligations, his family was erased, every record purged, every statue toppled. His name became forbidden, not for rebellion, not for heresy, but for economic failure. The Imperial Creed teaches that the Emperor protects, but he also expects payment. In the God Emperor's economy, faith must be demonstrated not only in worship, but in wealth. The Ministorum enforces this ruthlessly. The construction of a single cathedral on a cardinal world may bankrupt entire sectors, and it will be considered holy. The movement of an ecclesiarch's relic requires void ships, thousands of attendants, purification rituals, and the destruction of entire hab blocks to make space, and all of it is paid for by those below. Command is not freedom, it is cost. Even the Adeptus Astartes are not free from this economy of power. Though they exist beyond normal hierarchy, Space Marine chapters must still trade with Forge Worlds for ammunition, with Agri-Worlds for sustenance, with navigators for warp passage. And what do they pay with? Not thrones, not coin, but oaths, promises, service. A chapter may offer 2 centuries of protection to a forged ship's route in exchange for a single shipment of melter charges. These exchanges are not transactional, they are sacred. To break one is to invite doom. And at the pinnacle of all this sits the illusion of the Golden Throne itself. The Emperor's biomechanical tomb is the most expensive object in human history. Its maintenance consumes lives by the thousand every day. The psychers who are sacrificed to sustain its function are not criminals or mutants, but purchased assets, acquired, transported, and processed through a system that sees their minds as fuel. Their dreams, their fears, their identities, all stripped away in the name of payment. Because even the Emperor must be fed. And that is the final truth. No one is exempt from cost, not governors, not soldiers, not priests, not the God Emperor himself. Power in the Imperium is not granted. It is purchased with flesh, with coin, with control. And the debt it creates is never paid off, only passed down. Trade in the Imperium is not about prosperity, it is about continuity. In a realm of 1 million worlds scattered across a dying galaxy, exchange exists not to enrich, but to prevent disintegration. The Imperium does not trade to thrive, it trades to delay collapse. It is an empire of dust, of inertia, of decayed systems grinding forward under their own ancient momentum. The very notion of commerce, of marketplace exchange, is corrupted by time, war, and divine decree. Merchant houses operate not as engines of growth, but as custodians of stagnation. To profit is heretical. To preserve is holy. This is not capitalism. This is survival economics enforced by sacred bureaucracy and orbital firepower. The imperial tithe is the primary flow of goods across this vast empire. But it is not trade. It is extraction. A world does not offer resources willingly. It is required. The tithe is set by Administratum decree, based on records centuries out of date, enforced by the threat of extermination. Agri-worlds bleed grain, water, and gene stocks into void convoys bound for hive worlds. Forge worlds supply arms, machines, and servitors in exchange for raw materials mined by enslaved populations on irradiated moons. Shrine worlds receive these goods in fragments, in tribute, often through intermediary rogue traders who shave off shipments like toll collectors on a collapsing bridge. Nothing moves cleanly. There are no fixed prices. There is no centralized trade network. Every transaction must navigate the labyrinth of ancient trade charters, sanctioned routes, warp storms, and sector-specific ecclesiastical laws. Most commercial exchange is not recorded digitally, but on parchment, sealed with wax, bound by oaths older than the sectors they govern. A void ship might arrive to collect a tithe based on a charter signed before the Horus Heresy, and if a world refuses, the Adeptus Arbites arrive, or worse, the Inquisition. This is why rogue traders matter. They are the lubricants of this ossified machine, slipping between sanctioned routes and forbidden zones, bartering where others cannot. They are legally empowered to engage with Xenos, to trespass where others would be executed, to trade with feral or even heretical populations if it serves the greater continuity of the Imperium. They carry within their hands not only wealth, but connection, a link between the forgotten and the enshrined. For some worlds, a rogue trader's return is the only sign that they have not been completely abandoned by the stars. But rogue traders do not deal in thrones. They deal in volume, in risk, in legacy. Their exchanges are rarely even between equal parties. A single plasma weapon from a forge world might be traded for 1,000 tons of grain, not because that is its true value, but because the alternative is silence. The value of goods in the Imperium is dictated by distance, desperation, and danger. A vial of recaf is worthless on an agri-moon, but priceless in the upper spires of a hive city. A single water purifier could be traded for a continent's allegiance, not because it's fair, but because it's possible. These exchanges happen under constant threat. Warp instability, piracy, demonic incursions, or a single missed transmission can delay trade for decades. Some shipments never arrive. Some are warped beyond recognition. Some carry plagues sealed into their crates. And yet the system persists, not because it is reliable, but because there is no other option. And all the while, the shadow of the Mechanicus looms. The cult Mechanicus has its own closed-loop economy, its own barter networks, its own definitions of value. Tech priests do not trade in thrones. They trade in secrets. A partial STC schematic can be exchanged for planetary rights. A unique data core might be worth an entire manufacturum's output for a decade. They do not see goods. They see lineage, sanctity, and utility. If something cannot be disassembled and sanctified, it is worthless. And so, what little interfaction commerce does exist is shrouded in ritual, obscure binaric cant, and machine logic beyond human understanding. Even beneath the surface of sanctioned commerce lies the Empire's true black market. There are void ports where currency is time. There are smuggler rings where relics of extinct Xenos are exchanged for tainted augmentics. There are pirate fleets who steal tithes and sell them back to the same worlds they were taken from. There are cults who traffic in warp-bound narcotics and psychic trinkets, exchanging them for noble blood and political access. And none of this is visible. None of this is measured. But it moves. It feeds the rot. It is not just that the Imperium's economy is inefficient, it is that it was never designed to work. It was inherited, like everything else, from a better age now buried beneath a mountain of dogma and ash. It is held together not by trust or logic, but by force and fear. To question it is to question the throne. To reform it is to court heresy. And yet somehow it endures. Because the Imperium cannot afford collapse. And so it barters, it trades, it extracts, it bleeds, not to grow, not to evolve, but to remain. Currency, at its core, is built on trust. Not the trust of friendship, nor the trust of hope. It is the cold, impersonal belief that what one gives will be met with something in return. That the note you hold, the token you trade, the record you keep, means something. It is a shared delusion, a necessary one. It's what allows vast empires, or even simple marketplaces, to exist. But in the Imperium of Man, trust is dead, and the currency keeps moving anyway. This is the most terrifying truth about imperial economics. It no longer requires belief to function. The machinery is so vast, so calcified, so absolutely brutal in its enforcement that trust is obsolete, replaced by obedience, replaced by fear, replaced by ritual. And yet, within this system, the cracks are everywhere. On hive worlds, manufacturing workers are paid in ration credits they can never redeem. The currency is real, the redemption is not. Workers are told the system functions, but the food never arrives. The water lines are dry. The medici stations are empty. No one protests, because protest is a death sentence. But inside, something breaks. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly. A disconnection. The recognition that survival no longer comes from the system, but from subversion, theft, bribery, silence. On feudal worlds, the old noble families trade tokens etched in rusted metal, currencies tied to dynasties long forgotten. These tokens mean nothing to the wider Imperium, but within their walls, they still pass hands. Why? Not because they are valuable, but because there is nothing else. The system has collapsed. The tithe ships no longer come. The Administratum no longer checks the ledgers. The charade continues, but it is a farce, a mimicry of value. And still, the peasants labor, not for wealth, but for fear, for tradition, for a story that died long ago. The Administratum itself has forgotten how to value things. The data is corrupted. The cogitators are ancient. Records conflict. Planetary population reports are off by orders of magnitude. Requests for supply are processed centuries late. There are documented cases, buried in the forbidden archives of terror, of entire campaigns being launched based on accounting errors. Wars fought over imaginary shortages. Star systems scoured clean for tithes they had already paid. And when the error is discovered, nothing changes, because there is no correction mechanism. The system can process error, but not truth. On the border of the Segmentum Tempestus, a minor forge world was once issued a revised plasma coil blueprint as payment for the delivery of 2 million servo assemblers. But the data was corrupted in transit. The blueprint was incomplete, useless. The Archmagos demanded clarification. None came. Terror did not respond. The blueprint was declared sacred regardless. Thousands were killed for suggesting otherwise. And so, a broken design became the foundation for an entire generation of defective weapons. Why? Because the exchange had occurred. The transaction was complete. The currency had moved. The function of trust had been replaced by ritual enforcement. And the machine marched on. Even the black markets have begun to rot. Where once smugglers traded in rare goods and forbidden texts, now they traffic in fake relics, counterfeit authorization seals, and false oaths. And the terrifying part? Many of them work. Not because they are convincing, but because the system is so bloated, so broken, that no one can tell the difference. The seal of a long-dead Lord Commander might open a vault simply because the machine spirit reading it does not know what century it is. Value has become noise, a matter of volume, not validity. And yet, the illusion holds. Not because it is believed, but because the cost of disbelief is higher than the price of submission. This is not the collapse of a stock exchange. It is the slow-motion death of meaning itself. A throne means nothing now. A ration chit means nothing. A tithe schedule, a planetary oath, a promissory writ, they are all echoes. Ghosts of a system that once functioned. The people know this. The nobles know this. Even the priests know it, though they dare not say it aloud. And still, they comply. Because the alternative is the abyss. To say the system has failed is inaccurate. A failure implies a halt. But the Imperium does not halt. It decays. It devours itself while insisting all is well. It extracts value from rituals that no longer hold value. It demands loyalty to symbols whose meaning has been lost. It perpetuates economic function in the absence of trust, of logic, of purpose. It is an economy of ghosts, and no one dares admit they're already dead. There is a price for everything in the Imperium of Man. But what happens when the price becomes meaningless? When the numbers continue to move, but the meaning behind them has long since rotted away? when the coins are exchanged, but nothing is gained, when debt is inherited by the dead, when obedience is purchased with suffering, and suffering becomes the only currency that matters. What remains? Nothing. But that nothing still carries weight. It is this paradox, this grim, inescapable equation that defines the Imperium's economy. It is not merely broken, it is not irrational, it is hollow. And yet, it works, it moves, it kills, it survives. Because in a universe where every truth is mutable, every institution corrupted, and every system strained beyond comprehension, even nothing can be weaponized. The Imperial Credit, the Throne Gelt, the Ration Chit, the Servitor Indenture Form, none of these are backed by gold, by resources, or by faith. They are backed by consequence. If you refuse to acknowledge them, you die. If you ask why they matter, you vanish. The economy of the Imperium is not based on supply and demand. It is based on threat and endurance. It is a system that punishes not ignorance, but awareness. And so, nothing becomes everything. A blank writ sealed by the Adeptus Terror carries more weight than the cries of 1 billion starving citizens. A hollow coin, minted in a dead forge world and passed down through 6 forgotten empires, still commands loyalty. Why? Because the alternative is chaos. And chaos is worse than death. This is the final truth. The economy of the Imperium is not designed to enrich. It is designed to contain. It contains the horror, the hunger, the collapse. It turns them inward. It distributes suffering into manageable increments, allowing the empire to burn slowly rather than explode. The value of nothing is that it delays everything. The riot, the rebellion, the reckoning. It sedates the machine with ceremony and price tags until nothing is questioned, not because it is accepted, but because it is forgotten. This is why a world can pay its tithe in bodies and still not know what it was buying. Why a guardsman can fight 10 wars and never know what he earned. Why a hive worker can toil for 70 years and die owing more than he began with. There is no conclusion. There is no balance. Only forward motion. Only the slow bleed. And yet, the illusion persists. The child believes the ration chit will feed her. The priest believes the emperor hears his donation. The scribe believes the ledger has meaning. And because they believe, even briefly, the system endures. It drinks belief and excretes silence. And in that silence, it demands more. This is how the Imperium survives, by assigning price to everything and meaning to nothing. And so, the people pay. They pay in breath, in blood, in obedience. They pay to live a little longer. They pay to die a little slower. And the Imperium, bloated and blind, continues to count.